one of my students from last year who isn't even in the class now. He's already finished Math 10 with honors and got an A, but he's still watching my videos because I'm that funny.
He probably just like puts it on and just like leaves.
I don't care. Why wouldn't you?
That's why he's in math honors.
Yep.
What's the font?
Mesquite. Okay, here we go. These guys, looking at that, I have every single whole number between 1 to 10, yes? So are these roots or squares? Think back to our first lesson. Some of them are both, but all of them are what? Roots. Because every whole number is a root, because it can always be multiplied by itself. So these are our roots. So what do you think we're writing on the top? The squares. What's the square of 1? 1. Fill it in. Square of 2. 4. And fill it in.
9.
And?
16.
And?
25.
And?
36.
And?
49.
And?
54.
And?
81.
And?
100.
Done.
That's a smart fellow.
Everybody got it? Now, of course, you notice the pattern, right? Plus 3, plus 5, plus 7, and it goes on. Next thing that you got to remember, x squared gets me the square. The square root of the square gets me the number. Okay? Now what does that tell you? That tells you this. The square root, oops, that's a bad square root sign. The square root of x. What is x in math?
Number.
Any number. The square root of any number squared is that number, automatically. Everybody with me? So what is the square root of 76 squared? $76.
Yep.
It's not the square root of 76, it's the square root of 76 squared.
Oh.
Okay?
Hey.
So what is the square root of 147 squared? 147. Picking up what I'm putting down?
Where do you become like calculate 1 calculate?
Because this is saying it's the square root of 147 times 147. Right? Because that's what 147 squared means. So that's the length, that's the width, so it's 147. It's not 147 here, it's 147 squared. You with me? Okay, so no matter what you see, anything under a square root sign, if it's squared, the base is the square root. Cool? Okay. Now, we are going to move on to estimating the square root. Now, first of all, let's have a look here. Does 68.5, is that a perfect square? No, not at all. It isn't. Now, of course, as Riley has just pointed out, you can take your calculator and find the answer. Right? You could take this in your calculator. You could hit the square root button, 68.5, and equals if you need to, and you would get an answer, yeah? Now, again, if that's the only thing I'm asking you to do, then of course you'd use your calculator, yeah?
Yeah.
But what if you're doing something that this is only the first step of 10? What do I tell you to do every time before you attempt a really long calculation? Get an estimation, so you know if you have ended up at the right place. So what we're going to talk about here is how to do this without our calculators, to get an idea. Now, 68.5, since that's under the square root sign, this must be a square, yes? I am looking for the root. So I'm going to slide up a little so our list is visible. Where does 68.5 fit in on our list of squares?
Between 8 and 9.
Those are the roots.
Oh, between 64 and 81.
There's 64, 81. Those are the squares, yes? What are the roots? 8 and 9, which is what Bryn was just saying, right? Now, where does the 68.5 go in? With the red or with the blue? The blue, right? And it goes in right there, yeah? If I put this on a line, it's going to be way closer to 64 than it is to 81, yeah? Everybody with me? Okay. What would halfway between the two be?
77?
No, not quite. 72-ish, right? Agreed? So halfway is 72. So use your brains. What would be a good guess for the square root of 72? If it's halfway between 64 and 81, what would its square root be? 8.5. So now you have a line down here, don't you? 68 is halfway between 64 and 72, isn't it? So what would halfway between 8 and 8.5 be? 8.35 between 8 and 8.5? 8 and 850. 8.25. So there is our estimate. Does everybody understand?
Understood.
Okay? Now, if you check on your calculator 8.25 squared, you're going to get 68.06, which is pretty darn close to that. Understand? Again, doing it for the sake of doing it in math class seems stupid. But as you go further, recognizing common sense, what the answer should be close to when you've done all your work, it will be helpful to you. Adeye.
Will there be explanation questions on the quiz?
Let me see if I can see the future. I got nothing. Am I teaching you how to do it? So do you need to know how to do it? So do you actually know the answer to the question you just asked? So let's not waste 15 people's time, right? Let's fill it in. What's 13.5 between? You've got the list right on your page. You can see it. What's the perfect square that's less than 13.5? No, perfect square. It's between 9 and 16. So it's between the square root of 9 and 16. So it's between 3 and 4. So yeah, you just skip down to there. That's fine, babe. That's what I want you to do. Remember, this is just for thinking. If you don't need all the blanks, do you have to fill them in? Of course not. Now, is 13.5 closer to 9 or 16? It's closer to 16, isn't it? It's closer to 16 than 9, so that must be the root must be closer to what? It's closer to the root of 16, which is 4 than 3. So, it's between 3 and 4, and it's closer to 4. Everybody with me? So if we were doing some math that required that root, before we did all the work, we'd say, okay, that's going to be about 4. With me? Now, what would you guess it to be? Just let's go one step further. There's 9. There's 16. Right? Halfway between them is 12.5. Yeah? Is 13.5 past that? A long way past that? No, just a little bit past that. So I would say you'd be looking at maybe 3 point what? 0.5 would be halfway. Yeah, I'd say 3.6 to 3.7. Picking up what I'm putting down? Now, when you were doing your estimate, Perry, what would you use there? For your estimate, if you were doing a long calculation, what would you say this was? Because an estimate you're going to do in your head, yeah? So what would you use? Would you use 3.6, 3.5, 3.7, 4, 3? What would you use? Wouldn't it depend on the question? Right? If it was a really long one, I would probably just use 4. But if it was short, you could probably work with 3.6, couldn't you? Everybody good? Okay, so you guys do the next one. 51.5 between what and what?
49 and 64.
49 and 64. So that means its root must be between the root of 49 and 64. And what are they?
7 and 8.
So it's got to be between 7 and 8. Now I'm going to skip all this in here. Closer to 7 or closer to 8?
7.
Why?
51 is closer to 49.
Because 51 is closer to 49. Got it? And you guys could fill that in now in 2 seconds. It's closer to 49 than 64, so the root must be closer to 7 than 8. But you know it's between 7 and 8 and closer to 7. What would your guess be? I'd say like 7.2. Everybody picking up what I'm putting down? Now we only have done examples up to 100, right? But like I say, numbers get bigger. The more you know, the better off you'll be. Everybody good?
Yeah.
It's not hard, right? That's whole numbers or big numbers. What about fractions? Because fractions don't follow the same rule, do they? How would you guys estimate the square root of 3 over 10? First of all, are they perfect squares? No. So what am I asking you? I'm really asking you for the square root of 3 over the square root of 10, aren't I? Right? Does 3 have a square root? No. Does 10 have a square root? No. They're not perfect. Right? They're irrational, correct? But what did we do here when we had something that wasn't perfect? We used our perfect ones that were close by, didn't we? Is there a perfect square that's close to 3? What? 4. So I can estimate using perfect squares. So our estimate becomes not the square root of 3 because it doesn't have a square root. What does have a square root? 4. So can I change this to the root of 4? Is there a perfect square that's close to 10? 9. Square root of 9. What is the square root of 4? Square root of 4. 2. What's the square root of 9? 3. Everybody cool? Right? Everyone agree? Okay. So that would mean this is our estimate, right? Let's check. What happens if I take the square root of 3 tenths? That's the square root of the fraction, yes? I get 0.54. Everyone cool? Everyone agree? Yes? Now we estimated it was 2/3, correct? So that would be 2/3 squared. 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 Fine. Times 2/3. 0.44. Is it close? Is 0.54 close to 0.44? Pretty darn. 54 cents pretty close to 44 cents. Because why are we doing this? We're only doing this for an estimate, right? Why do we use estimates? To know if we're on the right track. Because who wants to do a page of math, get the wrong answer, and hand it into your teacher and get 0 out of 10? Right? So let's look at this guy. Can I do that? No. But 23 is pretty close to what? And 80 is pretty close to what?
81.
So isn't that pretty close to 25 over 81? So what is that? What's the square root of 25 over the square root of 81? 5 over 9. So that means that's pretty close to 5/9. Everybody good? Which is pretty darn close to a half, isn't it? So when you were doing your estimate, you could use a half. Everybody picking up what I'm putting down?
Yeah.
You guys do the next one. What's 8 close to?
9. 15.
16. So it's going to be 9 over 16, which is what? 3 and 4, which is pretty darn close to 0.75. Is everybody good? It's super easy, yeah? Can you work the other way? Because it's the same thing, isn't it? What do I have? Read the question. Identify a decimal that has a square root between 5 and 6. So what do I have? Is 5 the square or the root? It's the root. So I've got 5 and I've got 6, yeah? What is 5 squared?
25.
What is 6 squared?
36.
So, how many numbers do I have in there?
11.
I have 11 whole numbers, but I also have an infinite amount of decimals, don't I? So which decimals will work? All of them, between 25 and 36. Will give me a root between here and here. You could check on your calculator if you didn't believe me, but you don't need to check on your calculator because you guys already know this, don't you? Square root of 36 is 6, square root of 25 is 5. So every number in between there must have a square root between 5 and 6. Now, notice the question. Did I ask you exactly? No, you just have to choose any one of them. So, I need to be between 7 and 8. So that means I need to be between what? 49 and
64.
any decimal between 49 and 64. Any decimal. Give me one. Sure. 52.5. I check with my calculator just to prove he's right. Square root 52.5. Is that between 7 and 8? I did it right. In math, if it happens once, how often does it happen? All the time. So, we have now proven that. It was 7 point, whatever it was, who remembers? 24. So this, and here is the key. It is one correct answer out of how many? Infinite choices. That's the key to this, to math in general. Okay, you gotta be aware of this. Okay? Everybody's so concerned with the right answer in math that they forget that there's theory behind it. So if you know the theory, it is helpful. So you guys do the next one. I got to be between 11 and 12. So what is it? 121 and 144. See, Abey is already shortcutting himself down because he's paid enough attention that he gets it. So what number between 121 and 144? Any number. 129.737. Does that work?
Yes.
Yep. 143 0.9999. Does that work? Yeah, because it's not 144, is it? 121.0001. Does that work? Yeah, because it's not 121. Had to be between 11 and 12. Everybody cool? So obviously I'm not going to fill that in because it can be, I'm not going to fill in an infinite amount of choices. My wrist would get sore. Everybody got it? Cool? Okay. I'm going to give you like 3 questions on that out of your textbook, and then we're going to write our quiz once we've made sure everybody's cool with it. Okay? Now remember, we did whole numbers and fractional numbers. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions that are whole numbers and a couple of questions that are fractions. And then we're going to do one other slightly different thing. Actually, I lie. Let's do that now. Let's get that out of the way now, and then we'll be done. You guys should have blank space now on your paper, or you should be on the back of it should be blank. One of the two. Excellent. Okay, so on the back, we are going to do why we are doing this. Okay, here's the reason why. Remember, math exists because of what? Experimentation. People in the past looked around the world, they saw stuff, they recognized that there were patterns in the natural world. Okay? One of the things they noticed was the fact that numbers, even though they didn't have the numbers that we have, they had their own way of counting. They noticed patterns in these numbers. And one of the patterns they noticed, and it was very useful, it's actually one of the most useful things that we have in math, is the pattern that goes with right angle triangles. What is that pattern? Who remembers? Because you've all seen it before. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, which is evil. You shouldn't ever call it that. And I'll tell you why in a second, Riley. Everybody teaches it that way, and it bugs me. And here's why. First of all, Riley, which of these is A squared? You don't remember, because all you remember is A squared, B squared, C squared. Dylan, which one is A squared?
The one on the very left.
Why?
Oh no, I just know C squared is the one that's the...
Exactly. That's the important one. This guy is C. How do you know he's C?
I just remember that.
The opposite.
It's across from the 90 degree. Right? Because I can give this question to all of you and everybody can find C. But then the next question on the test, I go like this. And everyone's like, I don't know where C is. Of course it is. It's across from the 90. But I will give this question and half of you will get it wrong. Or I'll do this. I'll turn it totally on an angle. And everyone's still, I don't know where C is with the wires. Ah! So that's the first thing. Does it matter about A and B? No. This can be A, this can be B, or the other way around. Here's why I don't like teaching it as A squared, B squared, C squared. What if I do this? And I tell you this side is 3, this side is 4, and this side is A. How many of you would do that question wrong? Every one of you put your hands up. Because I give that question every year. Because you guys don't bother to learn math. A squared, B squared, C squared, Mr. Myers. Immediately. And every one of you was taught A squared, B squared, C squared. But as soon as I changed the letter, just like turning the triangle, nah, I got nothing. Dylan.
Isn't it the same thing, the C and the A?
No. So this is the way I like to teach this. Leg of the triangle squared plus leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. Not A squared, B squared, C squared. Because if your teacher changed the letter, and he or she will, just to mess with you, just like he or she will turn the triangles around, You will screw it up if you don't understand this. The legs are the shorter sides. And the hypotenuse is always across from the 90-degree corner. Always. No matter how the triangle rolls around, no matter what letters are there. Okay? Sometimes for fun, I give kids triangles that look like this. Lightning bolt, $, and peace sign. What? How can I do a squared, b squared, c squared when there's no letters? What's Pythagoras there? It can't be a squared, b squared, c squared because I haven't given you letters. So what is this guy? All of you told me, a squared, b squared, c squared. I got it. I told you don't do it that way. I said leg, hypotenuse. So what's this guy?
Lightning bolt
Lightning bolt squared,
plus money
$,
squared
equals
peace sign.
peace squared. Okay? Everybody with me? Now here's why this is important. What is that? It's an exponent, it's squared. Do I want a squared value when I do this? Or do I want the side of the shape? I want the side of the shape. How did we find the side of a square? No. How did we find the side of a square? It was the square root, yes? So how do I find the side of a triangle? I got to do a square root, don't I? Everybody forgets that. So if I want to do this question, I have to remember my last step is square root, always. Here's why it's a problem. I gave kids a question on a final exam. How far is it to row your boat across the lake? Okay? The lake is 10 kilometers long. The lake is 5 kilometers wide. Everybody with me? I told the kids you're going to row diagonally across the lake. I had more than one kid tell me that a lake that was only 10 and 5, if I told them to row their boat across here, I had more than one kid tell me it was going to be 125 kilometers. And they handed it in on a final exam. If they rowed this way and this way, it would have only been 15. But apparently this lake, if you row diagonally, stretches and becomes 125 kilometers long.
How did they do that?
They did A squared, B squared, C squared, Mr. Myers. 100 plus 25 equals 125. Done. It's squared, squared, squared. Did I want a squared? I wanted a square root. Okay? So remember that. The legs go on one side, the hypotenuse goes on the other. Okay? I want to make sure you guys are cool with that. We're going to do 2 questions with it only because you've done it to death in grade 8. At least you should have. We're going to do this one. And we're not going to use pretty numbers. We're going to use ugly numbers. 7, 12. And then over here, oh, Mr. Myers, you've reversed it. You're horrible to us. Why? You hate us so much. 14 and 6. Everybody cool? We're going to do 2 questions. That's it. What is missing here? A leg or a hypotenuse? Hypotenuse. So I know that Mr. Myers says it's leg squared, and he uses an L instead of an A because letters don't matter. plus legs squared will equal your hypotenuse squared, correct?
Correct.
Do I have one leg?
Yes.
What is it?
7.
7 squared, which is what?
49.
49. Plus, do I have another leg? What is it? 12 squared, which is what? 144. That's going to equal h squared. What's your next step? Add them up to get what?
193.
193 equals h what?
Square.
Squared. Everyone forgets that. How do you get rid of a squared? Square root. So we square root both sides. Now, let's estimate real quickly. Can we? We haven't memorized up to 200, have we? But I'll tell you right now, it's between 189 and 225. So it's between 17, moron.
13.8.
14.
It's between 14, which is 196, and 15, which is 225. Oh, it's a little less than 196. So it's between 169 and 196, between 13 and 14. And Perry has given it to us to be 13.8. Everybody cool? So what does this tell you? If you are the type of kid that likes to have shortcuts, okay? If you don't know the hypotenuse, then you add the legs. You square root adding the legs.
Good morning, academic summer school. Hope things are going well. Welcome to day 3 of 20. That's about 15% finish, I guess, or about 85% left to go, or 5% every day, so it goes pretty quick. Just as a reminder for all staff that attendance is due at 10:50. Please double check your attendance forms and ensure all students are identified. If there's students in your class that are not on the attendance sheet, please ensure their names are also written down. Hall passes have been provided for all staff at this time for students to use. Any students in the hallway should have a hall pass on them. That way we can ensure that students are indeed where they're supposed to be.
In the
And
hall.
for all students, at the end of the day, the pickup yesterday was much better. Again, we ask that if possible, for your parents when they come by to pick you up, to do so either at Claiborne Middle School or up and down the streets. Try not to do it in front of Robert Basin Secondary. As you can imagine, it is very congested out there in the afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next week. Have a great rest of the day. Summer school goes very quickly. Take care, everybody.
Okay. So over here, do I have an L?
Yes.
What is it?
14.
No.
Wait, 6.
6 squared. Plus, do I have the other L?
No.
No. Equals, do I have H?
Yes.
14 squared. So now we're screwed, aren't we? We have to do algebra. We're going to do a whole unit on algebra, so I'm going to give you the shortcut here. Because we're going to do a unit to remind you of algebra, because you guys are poopy at algebra. If you don't know a leg, then you have to do the square root of the hypotenuse squared minus the leg squared. So this one, you add the legs and you square root it if you don't know the h. If you don't know a leg, you subtract the hypotenuse and you square root it. And that's all I'm going to show you about that, because we're going to review algebra in our 3rd unit. That seems early. It's not. Okay? When you get back, we'll do a couple of questions with this, then we'll do our review, then we'll do our quiz. Okay?